My name is Sophia. I'm 26 years old, and I live in a small but bustling city in Oregon. I've always been an early riser, and my morning routine starts with a trip to the gym. There's something peaceful about those pre-dawn hours when the world is still waking up. The gym I go to is only a short drive from my apartment, and at 5:30 in the morning, it's usually quiet with just a handful of regulars showing up. I love that. I could focus on my workout without distractions. For months, I followed the same routine. I'd start with a light jog on the treadmill, then move to weights. There was this unspoken camaraderie between the early risers, even though most of us never spoke to each other. But about a month ago, I started noticing someone, a man who I had never seen before. He was always there before me, running on the same treadmill every single day. What made him stand out wasn't just his punctuality, but his behavior. He never interacted with anyone, never said hello or even nodded when passing by. He just stared straight ahead while he ran, eyes fixed on the wall as if he was in some sort of trance. No music, no phone, just that cold, blank stare. At first, I didn't think much of it. People go to the gym for different reasons. Some want to socialize, others just want to get in and out. But there was something off about him. He always wore the same gray hoodie, the hood pulled halfway over his face, and he moved with an eerie precision. Even when he wasn't on the treadmill, I could feel his presence. One morning, I accidentally forgot my water bottle in the car. I was midway through my workout when I realized it, so I ran outside to grab it. When I came back in, I noticed the man wasn't on the treadmill anymore. Instead, he was standing near the gym's front desk, hunched over the computer. It didn't seem like he worked there, but the way he moved suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. His fingers flew over the keyboard, and his eyes darted around nervously. Something about the way he glanced over his shoulder made my stomach twit. I thought about saying something but decided against it. Maybe he was just a staff member I didn't recognize. Besides, who was I to assume the worst? I shrugged it off and went back to my workout. But that image of him at the computer stuck with me all day. The next morning, he was back on the treadmill as if nothing had happened. But now, I couldn't help but notice how often his eyes would shift, just for a split second, to the gym's locker room door. It wasn't obvious, but once I started watching for it, I couldn't unsee it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd seen too many crime shows, read too many horror stories, but the unease lingered. It was like a small voice in the back of my mind was screaming at me to pay attention. 2 days later, that voice was justified. I arrived at the gym early that morning, even earlier than usual. To my surprise, the police were there. 2 officers were standing near the front desk, talking to the manager. The man wasn't on the treadmill. In fact, he wasn't anywhere to be seen. I overheard bits and pieces of the conversation. Words like cameras and locker rooms sent chills down my spine. My curiosity got the best of me, and I asked one of the employees what was going on. She hesitated at first, but eventually she told me. The man, the same one I'd been watching, had been caught trying to delete footage from the gym's computer system. It turned out he had installed hidden cameras in the women's locker room and had been recording for weeks. I felt sick to my stomach. The thought of being watched, of having my privacy violated like that, was unbearable. The police had traced the cameras back to him after finding his face on security footage. He was arrested that same morning. But the worst part, even after he was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I went to the gym, I'd glance around, scanning for cameras or people who didn't belong. The locker room, once a space I barely thought about, became a place of anxiety. I tried switching gyms, but the fear followed me there too. It's been months now, and while the man is behind bars, the damage he caused lingers. I can't trust the spaces I used to feel safe in. Sometimes I think about those mornings before I knew what he was doing. How his blank stare wasn't just odd, it was predatory, and how I brushed off the red flags because I didn't want to seem paranoid. Now I've learned to trust that voice in my head, the one that tells me when something isn't right. because sometimes it's not just in your head. My name is Ethan. I'm 26 and live in a small city in Texas. I've always been into fitness, and the gym is my escape from stress. I usually go late at night when it's quieter, and I can focus without waiting for equipment. It's always been peaceful, until that one night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday, just a few days before Christmas. The gym was almost empty, except for a couple of people lifting weights on the far side. I was wrapping up my session, feeling good after a long day at work. My routine was simple: hit the weights, do some cardio, and grab my stuff from the locker room before heading home. As I wiped down my last machine, I reached into my pocket for my locker key. It wasn't there. At first I thought I might have left it on the treadmill or near the dumbbells. So I started retracing my steps. The gym felt eerily quiet as I walked around. The air was thick with that usual gym smell: rubber mats, sweat, and cleaning chemicals. I didn't see the key anywhere, and a weird sense of unease started creeping in. I made my way to the locker room, thinking maybe I dropped it near the bench where I changed. The locker room lights flickered slightly, and the hum of the fluorescent bulbs was the only sound as I stepped inside. That's when I heard it, a faint metallic clicking. At first I thought it was just someone opening a locker, but the sound was too deliberate, like someone was struggling with the lock. My locker was in the corner, hidden from direct view when you first walk in. I slowly moved toward it, my heart pounding harder with every step. Peeking around the corner, I froze. There was a man crouched in front of my locker. He was wearing a janitor's uniform, but something about him didn't seem right. His hands fumbled with what looked like a set of tools, trying to break into the lock. I stepped back, unsure of what to do. My brain raced. Should I confront him or go get help? Before I could decide, he must have sensed my presence, because he suddenly turned his head and locked eyes with me. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then he jumped to his feet and bolted past me, shoving me aside as he ran out of the locker room. I shouted after him, but he was fast. By the time I made it to the gym floor, he was already out the back door. A couple of other gym goers looked up, startled, but no one had seen him come in or leave. I told the front desk staff what happened, and they immediately called the police. While we waited, I checked my locker. The lock was scratched and my gym bag had been moved, but thankfully nothing was missing. Still, the whole situation made my skin crawl. When the police arrived, they took my statement and checked the security footage. What they found made my stomach drop. The man had entered the gym a little after I did, but he wasn't a janitor. He wasn't even a member. He'd been loitering outside and slipped in when someone left the door propped open. The footage showed him watching me from a distance, following me as I moved around the gym. Even worse, the officers recognized him. He had a history of stalking gym goers and stealing personal items, including IDs, wallets, and phones. Apparently, he'd used stolen identities to commit fraud before disappearing for months. The idea that he'd been watching me, planning to steal my stuff, or worse, made me feel sick. The gym promised to tighten security after that, but it didn't make me feel much better. For weeks, I kept replaying the moment I saw him crouched in front of my locker. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone back when I did. Now, I never go to the gym late at night. I switched to a busier location, one with more staff and better security, and I double-check my locker key every time. What scares me the most is how normal he looked. If I hadn't caught him, I wouldn't have suspected a thing. It's a reminder that you can never be too careful, even in places where you feel safe. Every time I think about that night, I get a chill. He could have taken more than just my belongings. He could have taken my sense of safety, or worse, my life. My name is Liam, and I'm 28 years old. I live in a quiet town in Illinois, the kind of place where nothing really exciting happens, which I guess is why I didn't think much about being alone late at night. I've always been into fitness, and my schedule is usually pretty packed during the day, so I often end up going to the gym late at night after work. It's a 24-hour gym not far from my apartment, and I loved how peaceful it was at that time. No crowds, no waiting for equipment, just me and my routine. I've been going to this gym for over a year and knew most of the staff and regulars, but on this particular night, something felt off. I didn't realize it at first, but looking back, there were signs. It was a Wednesday, and I was finishing a long day at work. I got to the gym around 9:30 p.m., which wasn't unusual for me. By 10 p.m., the place was practically empty. That's when the gym staff usually left, and they'd lock the main entrance. Members who had key cards could still come and go, but the door was supposed to stay locked after 10. That night, I was determined to finish my workout, so I stayed later than usual. I was doing deadlifts, completely focused on my set, when I noticed something strange. The main door, which should have been locked, was slightly open. Not just unlocked, but propped open with a small wedge. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Maybe one of the staff had forgotten to lock it before leaving. I decided to handle it myself, thinking it was no big deal. I walked over, removed the wedge, and let the heavy door close behind me. I even tested it to make sure it was locked. Satisfied, I went back to the weight rack to finish my workout. But that's when things started to feel wrong. The gym was eerily quiet, as it always was late at night, but this time the silence felt oppressive. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to my imagination. I finished my last set and headed to the locker room to grab my things and take a quick shower before heading home. The locker room was as empty as the rest of the gym. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights and the echo of dripping water from a leaky faucet were the only sounds. I turned on one of the showers and let the hot water run while I got undressed. As I stepped under the spray, I thought I heard something, a faint noise, like a heavy footstep. I froze, the water pounding against my back, and strained to listen. Nothing. I shook my head, laughing at myself for being jumpy. After all, I was alone, and the door was locked now. I finished my shower quickly though, just to be safe. But as I wrapped a towel around myself, I heard it again. This time, it was unmistakable. Heavy footsteps echoing through the locker room. My heart started to race. I peeked around the corner, trying to stay hidden. That's when I saw him. A man dressed in dark clothes was walking slowly through the gym floor, his head swiveling as if he was looking for something or someone. He wasn't wearing workout gear, and there was something deliberate about his movements that made my stomach drop. I ducked back into the locker room, my mind racing. Who was this guy? How did he get in? Then it hit me, the door. Had he come in before I locked it? Or had he found another way inside? I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and called the police. Whispering as quietly as I could, I explained what was happening. They told me to stay hidden and stay on the line until they arrived. I crouched behind a row of lockers, trying to control my breathing. The footsteps were getting closer. I could see his shadow stretching across the floor, just a few feet away. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the gym door opening again, followed by voices, loud and authoritative. The police had arrived. I stayed hidden until they called out that it was safe to come out. The officers quickly found the man. He didn't resist, but his calm demeanor was unnerving. It turned out he'd been using the unlocked door for weeks, sneaking in late at night to steal from lockers and unattended gym bags. I was lucky. He hadn't taken anything from me, and more importantly, he hadn't confronted me. But the experience left me shaken. I haven't been back to the gym late at night since then. No workout is worth that feeling of dread, of knowing someone might be watching you, or worse,